Good day everyone, we are the group 3 who was assigned in module 4 with lesson 1 which was Comprehensive Dangerous Act of 2002 and lesson 2 which was the drug education. Today we will have the continuation of the report, but before that we will introduce our members first. So we have Alvin Cahoy who reported the section 4 up until section 35 of RA 9165 last meeting. Next, we have Ashley Tucaling who reported the Section 1 up until Section 3, which was the definition of terms of RA 9165 last meeting also. And today, we have Liezel Catamco who will continue the report of last meeting. She will be reporting Section 36 up until Section 50. Next reporter will be Giannah Vicariato, who is assigned in Section 51 up until Section 77. And that ends for Lesson 1. As for Lesson 2, we have Gwayne Colaste, who will be reporting what is a drug, when are drugs harmful, are products other than drugs ever abused, what is drug abuse, why do people turn into drugs, what drugs are commonly used, and how can you tell when one is abusing drugs? And lastly, I'm Nicole Camara, who is assigned in reporting what are the ill effects of drug abuse, what can a person do to prevent drug abuse, and what is the role of the youth on drug detection and prevention. So without any further ado, we will start the continuation of our reporting.
Hello everyone, I am Liezel Catamco and I will be discussing Article 3 to Article 6. So Article 3, Dangerous Drugs Test and Record Requirements. So in Section 36, Authorized Drug Testing. So gini siya, ang magkandak lang yun ani kay any government forensic laboratories or any of the drug testing laboratories accredited and monitored by the DOH. So, dili ka pwede bisangan asa lang yun magpa-drug test. Dapat yun dito ka sa authorized nga drug testing laboratories or drug testing centers. And if magpa-drug test ka, na ay duha ka methods na ikuan sa imuha, which is the screening test and the confirmatory test. Ang screening test, muna siya mag-determine if positive ang result and if determine po niya unsa na type of drug na ang na-take or ang na-used. And the confirmatory test, muna siya confirm lang sa positive screening test. And if pagkahuman mo og drug test, na ihatag niya drug test certificates, which is gamit kaayo na siya and valid lang na siya for 1 year. So, gamit na siya para sa mga magkuha o driver's license, magkuha firearms license, and permit to carry firearms. Kaya if ang isa ka applicant, dili siya maka-present o drug test certificate na nag-indicate na siya na drug-free, dili ma-issuehan iyahang driver's license or dili ma-renew. Same pod sa pag for firearms license and permit, dili po na sila mahatagan og permit if dili sila makapresent ato na mga requirements kanang drug test certificate. So needed po nila mag-undergo og mandatory drug test. Next is the students of secondary and tertiary schools. So, karon ang mga students needed na Japon magpa-drug test because daghan na kayo kabatan-unan karon ang nagakalulong na sa droga and naapod na sa ilang rules and regulations sa schools, sa ilang handbooks, student handbook na mag-undergo og mga random drug test. Siyempre, with the permission of the parents, no? Kailangan po manangkin para na ilahang anak mag-undergo ana. And next is the officers and employees of public and private offices. So, nadya po na sa ilang rules and regulations sa company or sa ahak nga trabaho. Kailangan dyan po nila mag-undergo og random drug test for the sake po sa safety po silang workplace. So, ano na siya. Next is officers and members of the military, police, and other law enforcement agencies. So, ang atong mga mga military, mga police, mandatory na dyan na kailangan dyan na nila mag undergo og drug test because na siya lisod kayo if atong mga police na noon may mga positive sa labig positive na siya adik maday atong mga police so inana kailangan dyan po na nila if pod matakman ng positive sila pwede sila ma-suspend or ma-terminate ang kana sila if ma-sap na positive. Next is the persons charged for a criminal offense na kailangan yapon miskan na prison na kailangan yapon sila mag-undergo og drug test. And also the candidates for public office shall undergo mandatory drug test po. Next is Section 37, issuance of false or fraudulent drug test results. So, kani if peke or mali imong gihatag na test results, kuha na siya, punishable. So, pwede ka mapriso from 6 years and 1 to 12 years. And magbayad ka og multa nga 100,000 to 500,000 if napatunayan na peke imong gihatag na drug test results. So mo na siya mapriso gyud. Next is Section 38, laboratory examination or tests on arrested offenders. So kini siya if ma-aresto ka tungod kay nag-violate ka og nag-violate ka og isa ka batas ikwan gyapon ka for screening laboratory examination. So if positive ka, makuha na positive imong result, i-challenge pa din na siya for 15 days aron ma-confirm gyud if mo na siya kay if miskan dili ka gagamit and positive imuhang result, kailangan yun na siya dato na lang na siya ipaagi sa katong confirmatory test. So ipaagi na siya sa mga laboratory equipments like gas chromatograph or mass spectrometry para gyud ma-confirm if positive ba jud ka, and ahira na siya ma-valid dayon sa court of law if mapatunayan na positive sa moto. Section 39, accreditation of drug testing centers and physicians. So the DOH shall be tasked to license and accredit drug testing centers in each province and city. So kailangan na jud gitask yun na ang DOH for para accredit na sila mga drug testing centers sa mga province, sa mga city, kanang mga places na wala kaayo yung mga drug centers at testing centers. And syempre kailangan pud og kanang authorized physicians na mag-conduct sa mga examinations in order to assure their capacity, competence, integrity, and stability to conduct the laboratory examinations. So mo na siya kailang ay jud nila para ma-maintain ang mga drug testings sa mga mga places na wala kayo mga drug testing centers and wala kayo ga-examine. Kaya basin dito na place daghan naman kayo mga drug addicts dito. So kailangan jud nag-drug testing centers. Next is Section 40. Records required for transactions on dangerous drug and precursors and essential chemicals. So kini siya ang mga pharmacist, physicians sa pharmacy if ang kailangan aware gid ang mga pharmacist and dapat sila dili sila basta-basta maghatag na drug if walay prescriptions gikan sa mga authorized na physicians, mga doctors and dili na sila pwede mahatag if katong prescription na gihatag is wala na isyuhan sa isa ka authorized nga physician or doctor ana. So needed yun na siya, and ang mga pharmacist pod kailangan nila mag-record if sa mga transactions o sa mga unsay gipang na sa buyer unsa nga mga drugs and essential chemicals. So mo na siya. So Article 4, participation of the family, students, teachers, and school authorities in the enforcement of this act. So in Section 41, involvement of the family. So the family is the basic unit of the Filipino society. So responsibility na sa mga sa family i-educate and i-aware ang each member sa family about drugs, and kung unsa jud na siya na maka-apekto na siya sa life sa isa ka tawo, especially sa parents, dapat nila i-guide and i-monitor lang mga anak, and tudloan jud nila unsaon pag-prevent sa pag-prevent anang drugs. So next, in Section 42, student councils and campus organizations shall include in their activities a program for the preventions of use of dangerous drugs. So ginatulo na karon, gina-appeal na siya sa mga programs about sa prevention, sa preventive measures. So na siya sa na siya sa mga programs and activities sa school. So in Section 43, school curricula, instruction on drug abuse prevention and control shall be integrated in the elementary, secondary, and tertiary curricula of all public and private schools. So para tong giingon ako kanina about sa Section 42, so na-appeal na siya, ginatudlo na siya karon sa elementary, secondary, to tertiary, sa tanan public and private schools. So in Section 44 pod, heads and supervisors and teachers of schools. So all schools, head supervisors and teachers shall be deemed persons of authority. So nana sila'y power para magdakop or appeal siya sa ma-involve siya sa sa pag-arrest sa isa ka person nga nag-violate said provisions. So dapat jud ang mga all school heads, supervisors, and teachers na mag-report, kailangan yun na sila mag-report sa proper authorities. Next is Section 45, publication and distribution of materials on dangerous drugs. So DepEd, CHED, and TESDA shall cause development, publication, and distribution of information and support educational materials on dangerous drugs to the students, the faculty, and the parents of the community. So ang DepEd, CHED, and TESDA dapat yun distribute sila og mga informational na mga materials or educational materials about sa dangerous drugs, and dapat na dito kung unsaon pag-prevent and pag kanang malayo jud ka anang dangerous drugs. Dapat po i-distribute na siya sa mga students, sa mga faculty, and sa parents and sa community aron ma-educate po sila kung unsa jud unsa jud na unsa gid na kadelikado ang drugs. So next is Section 46, Special Drug Education Center. So kani siya establish ni siya para sa mga out of school youth na mga bata, mga batanon. Kaya ang mga out of school youth na mga bata kanang wala na nag-eskwela, so kailangan jud na sila tudluan about anang prevention sa drugs, sao nila kaya halos sa mga wala nag-eskwela ng mga bata kuan pud sila ng drugs. So dapat jud mag-establish na ng special drug education center para sa mga out of youth na mga mga bata. So Article 5, promotion of a national drug-free workplace program with the participation of private labor sectors and the Department of Labor Employment. So, Section 47, drug-free workplace. So, dapat ang DOLE magpatupad na sila og magpatupad na sila mga drug abuse prevention program or mga policies against drug use in the workplace na ma-adapt rapod sa mga private companies. Same rapod as in Section 48, Guidelines for the National Drug-Free Workplace. So, workplace program. So, ang mga guidelines is naana siya sa drug-free workplace. Katong kailangan mag-implement sila og and mag-develop sila og mga programs na mga drug abuse prevention inana. So, na-appeal na siya sa guidelines for the National Free Workplace. So, Article 6, participation of the private and labor sectors in the enforcement of this act. So in Section 49, labor organizations and the private sector. So kailangan i-appeal sa ilahang collective bargaining or any similar agreements ang mga programs and information campaigns for the laborer. Pareha atong programs na nasa under sa Section 47 para ma-achieve ang drug-free workplace. So, dapat inana siya, kailangan i-appeal jud sila sa ma-appeal sila sa collective bargaining. On Section 50, government assistance. So, ang mga labor sector and the respective partners kay dapat magpadayon sa mga program na mentioned sa mga in the preceding sections. Yeah, and na makakuha sila og technical assistant as like kanang mga seminars and information dissemination campaigns na appropriate rapod sa government and sa law enforcement agencies. So that's the end of my discussion. Next reporter will be Miss Giannah.
Hi everyone, my name is Vicariato Giannah from IT1R2 and I will be discussing the following articles and sections. First, let's go on Article 7, participation of local government units. In Section 51, local government units assistance. Local government units must devote a significant portion of their annual budgets or tinuig nga budget sa pagtabang o pagpauswag sa pagpatuman niini nga balaod nga i-focus sa preventive or educational programs as well as the rehabilitation or treatment of drug addicts or dependents. In Section 52, abatement of drug-related public nuisances. Any place or premises that has been used on 2 or more occasions as the site of the illegal sale or delivery of dangerous drugs may be declared a public nuisance and abated in accordance with the following procedures. First one is by ordinance. Any city or municipality may establish an administrative board to hear complaints about the nuisances or magtukod og administratibo para maminaw sa mga reklamo bahin sa mga kasamok. Second is any employee, officer, or resident of the city or municipality may file a complaint. Ug ang mga reklamo mahimong ipasaka sa local Government Complaints Board. Third is, after hearing,
at which board may consider any evidence. Mahimong ang board magdeklara na dayon sa lugar o ang mga lugar mahimong usa na ka kasamok sa publiko or public nuisance. In Section 53, effect of board declaration. Kung ang lupon or board mo deklarar sa usa ka lokasyon o lugar nga usa ka public nuisance, mahimo dayon kini nga mag-issue og usa ka mando nga nagdili sa pagpahigayon, operasyon o pagmintinar sa bisan unsang negosyo o kalihukan sa lugar nga nakatampol sa kasamok o nuisance. Then, let us proceed on Article 8. Program for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Drug Dependents. In Section 54, voluntary submission of a drug dependent to confinement, treatment, and rehabilitation. A drug addict or anyone who violates Section 15 of this Act may apply to the court by himself or herself or through his or her parents, spouse, guardian, or relative within the fourth degree of consanguinity or affinity. Tapos, kung ang usa ka DOH accredited nga doktor mag-certify nga ang aplikante usa ka drug dependent, siya kinahanglan nga manduan sa korte nga mapailawom sa pagtambal o rehabilitation sa usa ka center nga gitudlo sa board sulod sa dili mubos sa 6 ka bulan or 6 months. Then, confinement in a treatment and rehabilitation center shall not exceed in 1 year if further confinement is necessary for the welfare of the drug dependent, then it will be done. Kung dili madala sa 1 year, so kailangan dugangan gyud ang iyang sentence sa pagkulong. In Section 55, exemption from the criminal liability under the voluntary submission program. A drug dependent under the voluntary submission program who is finally discharged from confinement or nakagawas na sa pagkabilanggo shall be exempted from the criminal liability under Section 15 of this Act, subject to the following conditions. He or she has complied with the rules and regulation. He or she has complied with the rules and regulation of the center, aftercare and follow-up program. Under the care of DOH accredited physician, the aftercare program and follow-up schedule formulated by the DSWD and approved by the board, provided that capability building of local government social workers shall be undertaken by the DSWD. And the second is, he or she has never been charged or convicted of any offense. Makasubot naman tani. And the third one is, he or she has no record of escape from a center or wala siya ni gawas bitaw nga. Wala siya ni escape o di ko kabalo sa Bisaya sa escape basta kay ako na to. Then, number 4 is, he or she possessed no serious danger to himself or herself or his family or her family or the community by his or her exemption from the criminal liability. Then, ana siya nga program is, pwede na siya ma-exempt na siya sa criminal liability. In Section 56, temporary release from the center after care and follow-up treatment under the voluntary submission program. Kung ang addict sa droga, certified nga ma-rehabilitate sa during the period of aftercare and follow-up, mahimo siyang ma-discharge sa korte, subject to the provision of Section 55 of this Act nga walay pagpihig sa resulta sa bisan unsang pending nga kaso nga gipasaka sa korte. But if the DOH determines that the drug dependent nga nanginahanglan og dugang nga pagtambal og rehabilitation, then he or she will be recommitted to the Center of Confinement. To the Center for Confinement, Then, in Section 57, Probation and Community Service under the Voluntary Submission Program. A drug dependent who is discharged as rehabilitated by the DOH accredited center through the Voluntary Submission Program but does not qualify for exemption from criminal liability under Section 55 of this Act may be charged under the provision. Then, in Section 58, filing of charges against a drug dependent who is not rehabilitated under the voluntary program. A drug dependent who is not rehabilitated after the second commitment of the center under the voluntary submission program shall, upon recommendation of the board, be charged for violation of Section 15 katong use of dangerous drugs of this Act and prosecuted like any other offender. If convicted, he or she shall be credited for the period of confinement or pagkabilanggo and rehabilitation in the center in the service of his or her sentence. And Section 59, escape and recommitment from escape and recommitment for confinement and rehabilitation under the voluntary submission program. Should a drug addict under voluntary submission case a program escape from the center, he or she may submit himself for recommitment within 1 week therefrom, or his or her parents or relative or spouse, guardians or relative within the 4th degree said period, kanang pwede siya i-surrender sa center bitaw kay lagi naka-escape man siya and shall be issued by the board. Ang board na din mag-declarar sa iyang sentence for his or her rehabilitation or confinement. Then, in Section 60, confidential of records under the voluntary submission program. Judicial and medical of drug dependent under the voluntary submission program is kinahanglan confidential o dili gamiton bato kaniya sa bisan unsang katuyuan. And he or she nga voluntarily submitted herself or himself for confinement and treatment and rehabilitation has been committed to a center under this program. Ang program niya is adto laging confidentiality of records nga dili dapat gamiton batok sa iya sa bisan unsa nga katuyuan like the upon or inana. In Section 61, compulsory confinement of a drug dependent who refuses to apply under the voluntary submission program. Notwithstanding any law, rule, and regulation of the country, any person determined of the found to be dependent on dangerous drugs shall, upon petition of the board, a petition for the confinement of a person alleged to be dependent or addict na siya on dangerous drugs to a center mahimong ipasaka ni bisan kinsang tawo nga gitugutan sa lupon sa regional trial court sa probinsya o syudad diin ang maong tawo makit-an. Then, in section 62, if a person charged with an offense where the imposable penalty is imprisonment of less than 6 years and 1 day or unom ka tuig ug usa ka adlaw and is found by the prosecutor by the court at any stage of the proceeding to be a drug dependent na addiction sa drugs, and prosecutor or the court as the case may be shall suspended all further proceedings and transmit copies of the record case of board to the board. In section 63, the records of a drug dependent who was rehabilitated and discharged from the center under the compulsory submission program or who was charged for violation of section 15 of this act shall be covered by section 60 katong confidentiality of your record of this act. However, the records of a drug dependent who was not rehabilitated or who escaped but did not surrender him or herself within the prescribed period shall be forwarded to the court and their use shall be determined by the court. Section 64. Suspension of sentence of a first-time minor offender. An accused who is over 15 years of the age or 15 pa at the time of the commission of the offense mentioned in section 11 of this act but not more than 18 or 18 anyos at the time when judgment should have been promulgated after having been found guilty of said offense may be given the benefit of a suspended sentence subject to the following conditions. First one is he or she has not been previously convicted of violating any provision of this act or katong Dangerous Act of 1972 as amended og ang revised penal code or any penal laws. The second one is he or she has not been previously committed to a center or to the care of DOH accredited physicians. Wala siya na committed sa DOH accredited physician about sa Number 3 is the board favorably recommend that his or her sentence be suspended. And upon recommendation of the board, the court may commit the accused under suspended sentence to a center or the care of DOH accredited physician for at least 6 months or unum ka bulan with aftercare and follow-up program for not more than 18 months or 18 ka bulan. Makakuha na siya og 1 year and 6 months. Section 65. Discharge after compliance with the conditions of suspended sentence at first-time minor offender. If the accused first-time minor offender, katong bata pa, 15 pa, minor pa, wala pa nag-18, under suspended sentence, complies with the applicable rules and regulation of the board, including confinement in a center, the court, upon a favorable recommendation of the board for the final discharge of the accused, shall discharge the accused and dismiss all proceedings. Upon dismissal of the proceedings against the accused, the court shall enter an order to expunge all official records other the confidential record to be retained by DOJ relating to the case. Okay, so section 66, privilege of suspended sentence to be availed of only once by a first-time minor offender. The privilege of suspended sentence shall be availed of only once, kas aragyod, by an accused drug dependent who is a first time offender kadtong minor padayon kadtong 15 pa at the age, and the commission of the violation of section 15 kadtong use of drugs, illegal drugs of this act, but not more than 18 years of age, the time when judge should have been promulgated. Section 67. Promulgate of sentence for first-time minor offense. If the accused first-time minor offender violates any of the conditions of his or her suspended sentence, the applicable rules and regulation of the board exercising supervision and rehabilitative surveillance over him, including the rules and regulations of the center, should confinement be required. So, kailangan yun siya ipakulong. The court shall pronounce judgment of conviction, and he or she shall serve sentence as any other convicted person. In section 68, probation or community service for a first-time minor offender in life of imprisonment. Upon promulgation of the sentence, the court may, in its discretion, place the accused under probation, even if the sentence provided under this act is higher than that provided under existing law on probation, or impose community service in life of imprisonment. In case of probation, the supervision and rehabilitative surveillance shall be undertaken by the board through the DOH in coordination with the Board of Pardons and Parole and the Probation Administration. In both cases, judicial records shall be covered by the provision of Section 60 and 64 of this Act. Records to be kept by Department of Justice. The Department of Justice shall keep a confidential record of the proceeding on suspension of sentence and shall not be used for any purpose other than to determine whether or not a person accused under this act is a first-time minor offender. In Section 70, liability of a person who violates the confidentiality of records. The penalty of imprisonment ranging from 6 months and 1 day or 6 kabulan ug usa ka adlaw to 6 years or 6 katuig, and a fine ranging from 1,000 pesos to 6,000 pesos shall be imposed upon any person who, having official custody of all access to the confidential records of any drug dependent under voluntary submission programs, or any who having gained possession of said records, whether lawful or not, reveals their content to any person other than those discharged with the prosecution of the offenses under this act and its implementation. In Section 71, liability. In Section 71, liability of a parent, spouse, or guardian who refused to cooperate with the board or any concerned agency. Ang katong mga parent or anyone nga dili mo tabang mo cooperate sa mga agency about sa drug addict kay mahimong ma-accuse. In Section 71, liability of a parent or spouse or guardian who refuses to cooperate with the board or any concerned agency. Any parent, spouse, or guardian who, without a valid reason, refuses to cooperate with the board or any concerned agency in the treatment and rehabilitation of a drug dependent who is a minor or wala pa sa tamang edad, wala pa nag-18, or in any manner prevents or delay the aftercare, follow-up, or other programs for the welfare of the accused drug dependent, whether under voluntary submission program or compulsory submission program, may be cited for contempt by the court. In Section 72, cost sharing in the treatment and rehabilitation of a drug dependent. The parent, spouse, guardian, or any relative within the fourth degree of consanguinity of any person who is confined under the voluntary submission program or compulsory submission program shall be charged a certain percentage of the cost of his or her treatment and rehabilitation. The guidelines of which shall be formulated by the DSWD taking into consideration an economic status of the family of the person confined. The guidelines therein formulated shall be implemented by a social worker of the local government unit. In Section 73, the existing treatment and rehabilitation center for drug dependents operated and maintained by the NBI and the PNP shall be operated, maintained, and managed by the DOH in coordination with other concerned agencies. The national government, through its appropriate agencies, shall give priority funding for the increase of subsidy to existing government drug rehabilitation centers and shall establish at least one drug rehabilitation center in each province, depending on the availability of funds. In Section 74, the duties and responsibilities of the Department of Health, or DOH, under this Act. The DOH shall oversee, monitor, supervise all drug rehabilitation throughout the country in coordination with the DSWT and other agencies. Second is license. The DOH shall license, accredit, establish, and maintain drug test network and laboratory, initiate and conduct support scientific research on drugs and control. Third is the DOH shall encourage, assist, and accredit private centers, promulgate rules and regulations setting minimum standards for the accreditation to assure their competence or integrity and stability. Fourth is prescribe and promulgate rules and regulations governing the establishment of such centers as it may deem necessary after conducting a feasibility study. Fifth is the DOH, without prejudice to the criminal prosecution of those found guilty of violating this act under the closure of a center for treatment and rehabilitation of drug dependency, when after investigation it is found guilty of violating the provision of this act or regulation issued by the board. And the last one is charge reasonable fees for drug dependency examinations, other medical and legal services provided to the public, which shall accrue to the board. All income derived from these sources shall be part of the funds constituted as special funds for the implementation of this Act under Section 87. Then let's move on Article 9. Dangerous Drugs Board and Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency. Section 75. The Dangerous Drugs Board. The board shall be the policy. The board shall be the policy making a strategy, formulating body in planning and formulation of policies and program on drug prevention and control. It shall develop and adopt comprehensive, integrated, unified, and balanced national drug abuse prevention and control strategy. It shall be under the office of the President. In Section 76, responsibility and liability of law enforcement agencies and other government officials and employees in testifying as prosecutions, witnesses in dangerous drug cases. Any member of law enforcement agencies or any other government official and employee who, after due notice, fails or refuses intentionally or negligently to appear as a witness for the prosecution in any proceedings involving violation of this act without any valid reasons shall be punished with imprisonment of not less than 12 years and 1 day, or 12 ka tuig ug usa ka adlaw, to 20 years and fine of not less than 500,000 pesos. In addition to the administrative liability, he or she may be met out by his or her immediate superior and or appropriate body. Article 9. Implementing Rules and Regulations. Section 77. Implementing Rules and Regulations. The present board, in consultation with the DOH, DILG, DOJ, DepEd, SWD, DOLE, PNP, NBI, PAGCOR, and PCSO, and all other concerned government agencies shall promulgate within 60 days the implementing rules and regulations that shall be necessary to implement the provision of this Act. This Act, which is consolidation of Senate Bill number 1858 and House Bill number 4433, was finally passed by the Senate of the House of Representatives on May 30, 2002 and May 29, 2002, respectively. That's all, and let's go to the next reporter.
Good day, everyone. I'm Liezel Catamco from IT1R3 and here to continue Group 3's discussion on Lesson 2, Drug Education. Lesson 2, Objectives. At the end of this lesson, the students should do the following. Know what drug is and when it is harmful. Identify harmful drugs. Enumerate reasons why people turn into drugs. Drugs which are commonly used. Description of a person who takes drugs. Ill effects of drugs. What a student can do to prevent drugs, and discuss the role of the youth on drug detection and prevention. Knowing these objectives before and after the discussion is very important, for we will be able to understand the lesson and what is going to be discussed, and remind ourselves to take down notes and know how to prevent ourselves and others in using such drugs. So, what is a drug? A drug is a chemical substance that brings about physical and emotional or behavioral change in a person taking it. In simple terms, drug is a substance that changes the way our bodies and minds work. Also, a drug is used in diagnosis, treatment, or prevention of condition or a disease. So when are drugs harmful? Drugs may be harmful when taken in excess. Some drugs can also be harmful if taken in dangerous combinations or by hypersensitive or allergic persons in ordinary or even small amounts. So drugs are harmful when taken too much, and which it will cause to overdose. So, unsa pa daw na kadgamay or kadako atong ma-intake ka drugs, is that is nagunay effect, and because there are a lot of different drugs. So different drugs poses different dangers, in which we will know later the commonly used drugs. Then, are products other than drugs ever abused? So to answer this question, yes. Glue, paint, thinners, gasoline, and other volatile or breathable solvents contain variety of dangerous chemical, and they should be sold and used with cautions. An example of this is that kung makita mo kanang mga bata bitaw nga nasa mga street, or even kanang, I don't know if you have seen it, like diya dapit sa cathedral, sauna diya sa Duaw Park, kay sauna is ga video media, then naay mga bata nga kanang gahapang hawid og cellophane, and then ilang gasimhuton. So ang sulod ay aton cellophane are solvents like rugby or volcasil. So they tend to abuse such solvents, and maybe because of one of the reason is that because of their smell, ganahan kay sila na, even though very strong gid kay siya nga baho, and very dangerous gid siya sa ato ang health, and especially to our lungs bitaw, and sa atong mind, kay makadaot yun na siya ng mga solvents. So what is drug abuse? It is the use of any chemical, substance, licit or illicit, which results in an individual's physical, mental, or social impairment. So before I go to the next slide, I would like to tell you the difference between drug abuse and drug addiction. Drug abuse is it focuses more around sa the way a person uses drugs, unsaon niya pag-use bitaw sa drugs, while drug addiction is when you can't stop, or the inability to stop, even though you have even though kanang numerous attempts na to stop. So mo na siya ang drug addiction. So number 1 on drug abuse, using without benefit or prescription use of drugs which have the capacity to alter the mood or behavior. So kanang magamit og drugs bitaw, then even though kanang wala na siya benefit sa imuha, but then you use it and tend to abuse. So that's why kanang nagiuban ang mga tao nga mo change na lang ilang behavioral, kay mag-use sila ana ng mga drugs even though wala na siya sa ilang prescription. Number 2, using drugs and substances for a purpose different from the one which the drug has been prescribed. So example is gi-prescribean ka sa imong doctor para sa labad sa ulo, but then you lahi imuhang gi-use nga drugs, maybe pang sakit dito sa tiyan. So number 3, using drugs and substances having no legitimate and medical application for purposes other than research. Number 1 example is that using of marijuana bitaw. Diba, we all know that marijuana is kanang makatabang siya, but then people tend to abuse marijuana, and kanang grabe na gid kay ilahang pag-use, dili na gid kay siya healthy bitaw, imbes na dapat kanang pang tambal lang unta siya, pero grabe na kay ilahang pag-use kana atong marijuana, then nasubraan na, then kanang very bad na kayo and dangerous na pud kayo sa ilang health. Next is, why do people turn to drugs? So number 1 is that medicines can solve problems. So people thought using drugs or medicines can solve their problems. And yes, sometimes they are necessary, but they are still drugs, and they act as stimulants or sedatives, and too much drugs or medicines can kill us. So if you do not use medicines as they are supposed to be used, they can be as dangerous as illegal drugs. So many people also think that drugs are solution, but eventually the drugs become the problem because grabe na kailang pag-use. Then number 2, widespread access to various drugs. Um, since we all know nga daghan kaayo different types of drugs, then the more ang risk bitaw factors as a person has, so the greater the chance that taking drugs can lead to addiction. So ma-addict din sila kay kanang labaw na kung kana nga drug is they thought wala gyud sa ilang pain, or kung na sila gibati tapos they thought if taking too much will kanang mawala na dayon ilahang mga ginabati. Number 3 is peer pressure. So peer pressure is that some people take illegal drugs because of curiosity or influenced by their friends or barkadas. Then kana bitaw makita sila nga ilang friends or people they know nga nag-use of drugs, then di ba ma-curious mga kahalag yun na para asa dayon na, and and some take it to escape stress or relieve them or to escape boredom, and some taking it because they want to fit in. So when choosing of friends, kanang need gid ka mo choose na kana bitaw healthy or they have a benefit to you, dili kay kanang they will have bad influence. So choose your friends wisely and kanang mo influence sila sa imo in a good way. Number 4 is the notion that drugs gives enjoyment to users and in the context that is used as an alcohol substitute. So they thought that using drugs can give their enjoyment or happiness. Labaw na kung kanang mahutdan na lugar og alcohol, then after they use then drugs. But no, that is very wrong and very bad for all of us. The next is what drugs are commonly used. So drugs that are commonly abused depending on their pharmacological effects may be classified into number 1 is the stimulants. So stimulants drugs, this increases alertness and physical disposition. Examples are amphetamine, cocaine, caffeine, and nicotine. So amphetamine, ang naong aning amphetamine is kadang bitaw tablet na siya, but then I think kanang ginapudpud din nila, and as you can see in the picture kana pudpud siya and they turned into powder. Then amphetamine is used now in the treatment of attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, narcolepsy, and even obesity. So for people nga kanang mga fat or mga dagko nga tao, so they kanang kung tapulan sila mag-exercise or diet, then they tend to choose using drugs such as amphetamine jud. The next is cocaine. So cocaine used as an illegal stimulant and sometimes medicinally as a local anesthetic. And cocaine is very highly addictive, and it is involved in nearly 1 in 5 overdose deaths. And its health effects includes asthma, bowel decay, and increased risk of HIV. So, ang naong aning cocaine, if you have seen a lot of movies nga kanang mura gyapon na siya og kanang powder, gyapon na siya color white. Then kana ila dayong I don't know how they do it, but I think kanang I don't know if gakanon vanilla. I'm not really fan of drugs man jud, but then the face of cocaine is kanang same raman ata gyapon siya sa amphetamine. Nga kanang powder bitaw siya, then they put it in kanang mga packets na inasulod nila. Then caffeine. So caffeine, a crystalline compound that is found especially in tea and coffee plants, and is a stimulant of the central nervous system. So kana dong too much kainom og kape, kana it very bad yun na siya kay kanang kay di ba ang may baon na nato ang uban kay kanang kumasubraan og kape kay murag mabuang na or unsa ba kanang murag kanang moingon na ka nga okay ra ka but then lahi na ilang ginatubag ana nasubraan na gid sila kape. So dapat dili gyud ta magpalabi og kape miskan dugay pa ta matulog but then dili gyud palabi ang kape. Then next is nicotine. So nicotine is a toxic colorless or yellowish oily liquid that is the chief active constituent of tobacco. So kanang if you have seen cigarettes, so if you kanang i-open bitaw nimo ang cigarettes na ay sulod diha ng mga dried leaves or kanang mga yellowish nga mga kanang basta leaves kana muna siya ang nicotine. Then number 2 is the hallucinogens. So hallucinogens are drugs which affect sensation, thinking, self-awareness, and emotion, changes in time and space, perception, delusions, or false beliefs, and hallucination may be mild or overwhelming depending on dose and quality of the drug. Examples are LSD, mescaline, and marijuana. So hallucinogens daw, from the word itself, klaro gid kaayo nga ginamin is to hallucinate. So LSD are drugs that can cause hallucinations or hallucinogenic. So kana inyong makitaan sa picture, those are LSD. And mga color na siya, mara siya og candy bitaw ana. Then ang effects ani kay include intensified thoughts, emotion, and sensory perception. Like lahi na imong panan-aw, ga color na or ga rainbow na baka imong panan-aw ana. Next is mescaline, also a hallucinogenic and intoxicating compound present in mescal buttons from the peyote cactus or kana bitaw ang face aning ay ang naong aning mescaline is kanang murag siya cactus, then cactus siya tapos ihang tunga is kanang naay gablum nga flower ana. Then next is marijuana. Marijuana is a cannabis, especially as smoke or consumed as a psychoactive or a mind-altering drug. So we all know what is the face or unsay nawong sa marijuana man kanang mura siya og ay kanang dahon nang na siya na mura siya ma-compare pag ina murag lagundi, di ba? Then marijuana is healthy man unta siya kanang makatabang man unta siya sa atong health, but then people tend to abuse it and kana makadaot na gid kaayo siya. Number 3 are the sedatives. These drugs which may reduce anxiety and excitement. Examples are barbiturates, non-barbiturates, tranquilizers, and alcohol. So barbiturates are drugs that can cause drowsiness and can control seizures. So kaning mga sedatives is kanang mostly gina-use ni siya sa hospital. Kay ana bitaw ipakatulog ang mga patient ana, but then kung sa ano lang ni is people tend to abuse it and kanang gina-use nila like sa kanang mga movies. I don't know if you have seen one, kanang ginabutang nila sa mga drink bitaw kana para makatulog ang kana ilang na sila ginapunterya or target na someone. Number 2 is non-barbiturates. It does not consist or pertaining to barbiturates, but it works by increasing the effects of a neurotransmitter called gamma-aminobutyric acid, which means they slow down the body and brain's function. Then also they can be used to help with anxiety and insomnia. So kani gyapon ang non-barbiturates is gina-use gyapon ni kanang ang uban is ginabutang ni nila sa drink gyapon sa someone para kanang mawala ilahang kakusog din na nila ma-feel unsa ilahang gusto mabuhat. So kana. Next is tranquilizers. So a medicinal drug taken to reduce tension or anxiety. Also acute stress reactions and panic attacks. Commonly known medication of tranquilizers include Xanax, Valium, Clonopin, and Ativan. So tranquilizers is kanang gina-inject ni siya no na siya sa sudlanan ay no gamay na siya nga sudlanan then gina-inject na siya para ma-reduce bitaw ang like example kanang maka-feel og mga panic attacks kana gina-use na nila ang tranquilizers. But na diri sa picture kanang nakabutang sa mga injection mo na siya ang tranquilizers. Next is the alcohol, in which it is classified as a drug because it interferes with our normal body functioning. So ang alcohol daw is drugs gyapon siya. Dili siya kanang powdered or mga kanang liquid siya, classified gyapon siya sa drug because people tend to abuse alcohol. Like, grabe, palabi na kayo inom bitaw, mabuntagan na lang or ana. Diba, dili naman na maayo kay ang uban kay madisgrasya na lang tungodan ng alcohol kay grabe na kay palabi na kay inom. So no, that is very wrong and very bad for our for our health. Number 4 are narcotics. These drugs relieve pain and often induce sleep. Examples are opium and its derivatives such as morphine, codeine, and heroin. So opium is a highly addictive narcotic drug that is used all over the world. So if you have listened on Miss Ashley's report, mention to niya ang opium. So ang opium daw is a dried latex obtained from the seed capsules of the opium poppy. And it was also showed on say naong anang opium. The next is derivatives such as the morphine. So morphine is an analgesic and narcotic drug obtained from opium and used medicinally to relieve pain. So ang morphine is gikan ra gyapon na siya sa opium, which is ang katong sulod bitaw sa opium, mao na siya gina-process na nila and to turn into morphine. The next is the codeine, a sleep-inducing and analgesic drug derived from morphine. So, from opium, then to morphine, then to codeine. So, ang codeine kay gikan ra gyapon siya sa morphine, in which ang morphine is gikan gyapon atong opium. Nga kanang naara na siya sa sulod. Ang plant ana is though cute kay tan-awon ang plant, but then dili dito siya maayo sa atua. Then lastly is the heroin, often used illicitly as a narcotic producing euphoria. So kanidang heroin is gina-use nila to feel happiness or enjoyment, like kalit kalipay do walay dapat ikalipay bitaw ana. And I don't know if you have seen Euphoria. Ay wala pa mo ka-watch og Euphoria, but then I think they've used this kind of drugs in that particular TV show. Then next is, how can you tell when one is abusing drugs? So how can you tell when one is abusing drugs? Number 1 is they get irritable, discourteous, defiant, and aggressive. Number 2 is untrustworthy and lacks self-confidence. Number 3 is unhealthy and unconcerned with grooming. Number 4 has a low frustration tolerance. Number 5 lacks of interest in his studies or work. Number 6 blames everybody for his problems. And number 7 prefers his barkada where he feels accepted. So drug abuse takes many different forms, and the signs can vary greatly from person to person. So doesn't mean nga kanang dali ra siya masuko is ka drugs na siya. No, because it differs from person. So we can begin to tell if someone is using drugs through a physical, behavioral, and social changes. And some physical changes associated with drugs is that ang eyes bitaw kanang ang mga mata sa kanang drugs is kanang mamula or kun dili kay murag nanay gagawas nga dugo or even mag-glassy na mag-shiny na kay ilahang mata. And unusually, ma-widen or mugamay ilang mga pupils kanang sulod sa ato ang eyes bitaw kana siya. And even sudden weight loss, magkalit or sila kaniwang or even weight gain manambok ra kalit. And constantly ang uban kay kanang sige nagsipunon bitaw or even kanang magdugo na ilang ilong permi. And also mood swings and general personality changes, and some illegal drug takers they can't stop using, so they make it as a habit. Kanang bitang murag ginapangita na always sa ilahang body kana nga substance mao nang permi na noon nila gina-use ang kana nga type na drugs. So other drugs have medical applications such as prescription of drugs, but kanang mo too much of using prescription of drugs can cause overdose. Then like other substances, example are marijuana. They undergo man research, then it is used though to treat a variety of medical issues such as arthritis, epilepsy, glaucoma, HIV, chronic pain, Alzheimer's, cancer, and others, but people tend to abuse marijuana that much. Then this will cause they can be addictive and will result to emotional and physical changes of the body. That's why kanang you must always be careful bitaw when kanang nate ginatake na drug kay basin palabi na kayo ta abi na to makaayos ato ang self, but no, dapat kung sa lagi prescribe sa doctor ikapila lang siya gina-use or ikapila lang dapat siya intake, and one day mao lang yun dapat na siya. Then kanang when choosing of friends pod like dapat always you ta be mindful kung kisa atong mga friends or kisa atong mga kauban, because nabigyan na influence ang friends sa tua, so that's why we must always be careful in everyone and always to think thoroughly on what you will do with yourself, because this will affect your future also. So to continue the report, next reporter will be Miss Nicole Camara. She will be reporting what are ill effects of drug abuse, what can a person do to prevent drug abuse, and lastly, the role of the youth on drug detection and prevention. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I'm Nicole Camara, who will be reporting what are ill effects of drug abuse. So first is malnutrition. Drug abuse causes malnutrition due to the contents of the drugs, especially kanabitang mga stimulant types of drugs, which was discussed earlier by Gwayne. Specifically, kanang mga stimulant is cocaine and amphetamines. Ga-produce na sila og euphoric highs na ga-cause sa user na dili bitaw gutomon for pila ka days, and because of that kay dehydrated and kulang sa vitamins and minerals ang body nila, and leading to malnutrition. Second is panic reaction. We have what we call kanabitang substance-induced anxiety disorder, which means kanabitang gagamit og mga illegal drugs is maka-experience sila og nervousness, restlessness, and panic attacks. Because ga-intake sila og illegal drugs, especially bitaw kanang mga drug addicts usahay gatawagon nato sila og nakahay because ilang thoughts, minds, emotion, and action kay murag out of this world na. And wala na sila sa insakto nga hunahuna. And as what I have said earlier, na ay contents ang drugs, especially ang stimulants, na makakause og problem on how we think, feel, and act. Third is physical damage. If ga-intake bitaw og illegal drugs ang usa ka tawo, maapektuhan pud ilang health, not just only mentally but also physically. What I said earlier na if masobran og intake sa drugs, usahay dili nakagutumon, and the way ka mag-think kay gakaapektuhan gyapon sa drugs. Those factors may cause na ma-weaken ang immune system, and it can also affect the heart, and causing to kanabitang mga heart attacks, mag-collapse ang atong veins and blood vessel due to infection. We can also experience abdominal pain kay since dili naman taga kaon ana, di ba, if karang ga-intake og drugs, resulting to weight loss. So that's it for what are ill effects of drug abuse. So moving on, we have what can a person do to prevent drug abuse. So first is maintain good physical and mental health. So if you have a healthy body with a healthy mind, you won't rely to such drugs because kasagara sa mga drug user, ang ilang reason why ga-intake sila is because for medicine. But if you have a strong body and healthy mind, then it will prevent you from abusing drugs. Second is use drugs properly. Most drugs are beneficial when used under medical advice. So meaning this means that we should consult to our doctors first and take prescribed medications. Dili pud ta mag self-diagnose because what if di ba mali pud na tambal lang atong natumar or basin illegal drugs na di ay gyud to ang nainom nato without our knowledge. That's why it is important na moadto and magpa-consult sa mga medical professionals since sila ang mas nakahibalo. Third, understand your own self. Accept and respect yourself for what you are. So that means understanding your own self can also be helpful because atong generation karon ang mga teens bitaw usahay, they don't know what path they should choose. Wala sila kabalo sa ilang mga wants, ilang needs, and we are more vulnerable to depression and anxiety. And because of that, some teens rely na lang sa illegal drugs and gina-abuse nila because they believe na it is an escape sa harsh reality. But if you understand yourself, you will also know what you should do, what you want, what you need, and you will have a positive mind in everything you do. Because if you understand yourself, confident pud ka sa tanan nimo gabuhaton, no? So fourth is develop your potentials. Engage in wholesome and productive and fulfilling activities. It means na if you have the talents and the skills, you can enhance it by joining organizations. For example, di ba karong college na ta, we should also enjoy our freshman year since diri nga year, dili pa kayo ta busy sa academics. And if naa kay talent or skill or hobbies baka ha, you should get to know your school and know the different organizations na ilang gina-offer na mabagay sa imuha, na imong ganahan, since it will enhance your potential as a student and as a person, and you will contribute to the greater good. Fifth is learn to relate effectively to whom you can communicate your problems freely. It means na having the right circle of friends can help you since mas vulnerable ang mga teenagers karon sa depression and anxiety. Dapat na atay friends na mag-support sa atoa in times of breakdowns, problems, and challenges in life. You can tell them your problems, but sometimes dili ta mag-expect na makahatag sila permi og advice kay naapod sila kaugalingon na struggles sa kinabuhi na basin dili pud nila ginasaba sa atoa. But keep in mind na your friends are not your therapist, but makahelp sila og palesen or minimize sa imong problem. And because of that, if na kay kanang right people bitaw sa imong circle, dili gyud ka makagamit og drugs since naa sila to help you. So you should choose your friends wisely. So, ika-6, learn to cope with your problems and other stresses without the use of drugs. So, find your stress reliever. Whenever nga naatay problems, kay we should have our own coping mechanism. So, for example, no, ako, whenever na ako'y problema, my coping mechanism is to play online games or kanang mulaag together with my friends since they are my stress reliever. And makahelp sila para malimtan na ako ang akong mga problems. But lahi-lahi man tag coping mechanism. But for me, kay kaning akong stress reliever, sometimes makahelp pud sila para maka-recharge og energy. And if ma-recharge na imong energy, once fully recharge na ka, you can solve your problem more effectively. And that way, dili ka mag-rely sa drugs. Since naa sila, naa kay stress reliever, naa pod kay friends to help you. So, 7th, seek professional help if you feel you cannot cope with your problems. So, sometimes when it is too much to handle na, we can consult to our therapist, but it is understandable naman na dili ta kwartahan tanan, no? And dili ta maka-afford ana nga type of consultation. So that's why we offer in the Philippines, we have our schools and barangays na libre para pod na libre magpa-consult para pod may pagawas nato ang atong gibati and para malesen ang burden, no? 8 is develop strong moral and spiritual foundations. So having a strong moral means kabalo ka kung unsa ang sakto and mali na behavior sa usa ka person. You know na labag sa batas ang ilang gabuhaton and permi ka mosunod sa rules and regulations na gipatupad sa law. And if you have a strong spiritual foundation, that means you have a strong faith in God. And because of these factors, dili na nimo buhaton na magamit og illegal drugs because kabalo man ka nga mali, di ba? If you have a strong moral and spiritual foundation, i-avoid gid nimo ang paggamit sa drugs, especially nga illegal siya diri sa atong nation, no? So, moving on, we have the role of the youth on drug detection and prevention. So first, be firm to say no to drugs. So everyone kitang tanan na atay right to say no, especially if kabalutan na mali ilang gabuhaton. Do not think about the opinion of others and decide for yourself. Kabalo man ta nga mali gyud ang maggamit og drugs, so dili mo say no gyud ta ana, no? Next is, second is, connect with your friends but avoid negative peer pressure. So, that means, I'm not generalizing, no? But most teenagers nowadays kay gainom na, especially kanang motongtong na bitaw og 18 years old. Pero wala may mali if mag-inom mo. But kabalo dapat sa tong limitations. Ayaw sa dinyo himuan na ayaw sa mo ang tubig ang red horse. Dapat maluoy ta sa atong atay, no? I also have friends na gainom mo. But ay lang if na important occasions like birthdays, um, Christmas, masa pa ba na mga New Year, and other occasions lang. And kabalo man sila want to stop, and even na friends na ako sila and kabalo ko nga gainom sila, dili man ko gaka-influence na mo inom, because naagad sa akong principles na di ko mo inom, so dili gid ko mo inom, no? And as I said, it is important na to choose your friends wisely and they should also help you to grow. But if dili ka ga-grow, nakauban bitaw sila, that means na dili sila helpful sa imo and you should avoid them. Third is make connections with your parents or other adults. So it means, of course na it is good to have friends, no? Na makahatag og life advices sa imo. But having your parents and other adults to guide you is much better because they have more experience and they can give factual and realistic life advice more. So fourth is enjoy life and do what you love. So live the life you want now without the influence of drugs and alcohol. And you should be more active in organizations that will help you to grow as a person and as a proper citizen of the Philippines. Fifth is follow the family rules about alcohol and drugs. So follow the rules of your family so that they can trust you in the future. So especially no follow the rules about alcohol and drugs sa imong family if gaingon gid sila na dili ka mag-inom-inom, dili ka gamit og illegal drugs, dapat dili gyud nimo buhaton since kabalo man sila na para man pud na sa kabalo man pud sila na makamaayo na sa imo. And ginaguide ka nila og sakto because ginabawalan gid kanila ana. So you should obey no ilang mga rules because trust is earned. So if buhaton nimo tanan nila gusto, then you will earn their trust, your parents, no? Sixth is get educated about alcohol and drugs. So first is you can consult to your teachers and parents since sila man ang mas knowledgeable ana nga mga topics, sila ang mas pananaw og mga balita, sila ang mas updated ana. And here in USTP, no, we have seminars and trainings. And that way we can know more and mas open-minded ta sa mga events and happenings sa atong environment, especially kaning mga drugs and alcohols na dili makamaayo sa atoa. Seventh is be a role model and set a positive example. So if you show a positive attitude, especially to the youth, they will also be inspired to follow your example. Mura ra gyapon siya og for example bitaw kay ga-discuss imong teacher sa class. Then ga-take down notes ka. Tas nakita ka sa imong seatmate naga-take down notes. So apil siya nag-take notes. So 'di ba even in a small way kay naka-inspire kag other people. So that means big impacts starts from small changes. So you should even in a small way, you should also do those things because wala ka kabalo makatabang gyapon na sila sa atong community. Eighth is planning ahead is very important. So for example, no, wherever you go on shopping or dates kanang mga laag, make sure that you are prepared at all times for unforeseen accidents. Make sure pud na you can call someone for help. If dili ka maka-call sa imong friends or family, kay pwede pud ka manawag sa mga hotline numbers sa atong mga agency. And let others know where you are going. Para updated sila if in case na mawala ka, kabalo sila kung aha ka ni adto. 9 is speak out, speak up, take control. So that means educate others and take responsibility for your life, your health, and your safety. Pwede ka mahimong advocate or speaker to influence others na dili maayo ang paggamit sa drugs and alcohol. Educate others, especially the youth, no? So that bahalag sa'yo pa kayo kay kabalo na sila sa mga dapat pangbuhaton, no? And lastly, get help. So it means na dili man kuan kinahanglan na ikaw ra isa mag-work, no? It is more productive and effective if you seek help and get others involved to be more active and build relationships that can help the community in the future. So that's it for the role of the youth on drug detection and prevention, no? So that's all for the report of Group 3, and thank you for listening.